So if we look now at the end here, in the kit you will also, well, here we go, you will also get our second reed switch, if you like, which is our, it'll come supplied like that already encased in the plastic for you, with it'll be a 2-pin plug on here, rather than 3 that's on this one. And in here there's a small pocket that the end of that just goes into. Okay. There's a hole there if you feel the need to put a small screw in there. I don't, because I know that what's coming next, that's going to incidentally, that reed switch is then going to read the position of that magnet, so we can establish a home or a level start point for the head. Okay, so next in the kit you will find our tally lights. Now I've pre-printed the plastic for the tally lights for you because I've pre-printed these parts for you so you didn't have to go away and buy a kilogram of clear plastic that you might never use for anything else again. There's hardly actually any required to create these parts. So when I made the cable, I've also printed those for you. And the tally lights slot into there, and one end has the 3-pin yellow plug on it. So the side that doesn't have the plug on it, the furthest away light, if you like, goes to this side, the same side as we've just installed the reed switch on. And these just go in here and they should just press into the holes. You see there's 3 holes on the side. There you go. And we have tally lights front and back. So now the cable, you see it along here, there's a high lip here, which is designed to take our cable, and we can just push that cable into that slot all the way around there and plug in our second or rear facing tally light into that side. Okay, and I'll make those cables clever later, but that cable just plugs in there and keeps it out of the way. Nice and tidy. Okay, so now you have our tally lights on this side and on this side. And for those of you who don't use tally lights, there will be a new function in the controller to allow you to turn that, give you the ability to not have them operating. Okay, next. Well, now that we have this bolted in place, we can also take 2 40mm long M5 low profiles, and we can drive one each into these 2 holes here and screw them down. Another one for here. Okay. So taking a look now at the top cover, which goes on here like so, snaps under there and comes down. What we have to do to this cover first is install the first of our AS5600 encoders. Now there are 2 encoders in the kit, one with a longer cable, which is for our pan, and the other one with a shorter cable, which is for our tilt. Okay. Now, if you have a look in the top of this part, well, you can see it, but we have a cutout here in the top ready to take this encoder like so. Now, the position of that encoder is variable depending on how much tension or where your motor is positioned to give you the proper tension on your belt. So the first thing to do is to turn that screw in and make sure your belt is a proper tension, or one that you find acceptable. And then measure the distance between the end of the device here and the magnet in the center of that motor. Okay, which for me is 88mm or thereabouts. And what we can do now, I just put this out of the way. For a second. So what we can do now is measure in again from the end for 88 millimeters. I'm just going to scratch a little position in the plastic to tell me that's where the center of my encoder chip needs to be. So the encoder goes into this like so with this is actually the AS5600 is that chip in the middle of this board. And this is what's going to read the position of our motor regardless of whether it's powered or not. So what it does, or what they do, is measure the rotation of the magnet very accurately down the I2C port on the main board. So the easiest way I've found to fit the only practical way I've found to fit these so far, given that I don't want this to be too thick, is to position that like so, with the cable coming out here. We line it up and make sure that our encoder chip is centered on our magnet position, and then I just use hot glue through these holes to hold that in place and to hold that cable in there. So I'll just do that just now and show you. Okay, so glue gun hot and ready. What I'm just going to do is press the board down, and I'm just going to squirt some hot glue down into each of the holes in the board. Bit stringy, never mind. And I'm going to also put some over that cable and just keep it in there. Make sure the board is flush or not protruding past the face of this. Okay, once that glue has set, get rid of all these little strings. Excuse me. And if you think this is a bit high here, you can pare it. The glue's come a bit high there. You can just pare it off with a knife. Just to make sure it doesn't obstruct anything underneath. Like so. Okay, and really that's all there is to it. So if we come back now to our device, our encoder cable that we've just installed can go down through this hole again with some of the stepper motor cable and pop out in the back in the same way. So there's our first blue encoder cable coming out here. Now all the I2C cables have the same 4-pin blue on them. It really doesn't, it does matter which plug they go into on the main board, but I'll explain that shortly. Okay, so now that we've got our encoder cable in place, all we need to do to close that box is put that on here. Allow that to go under into this slot along the back here. Go and come down. Now, if you can't get this under here, it may be that there's been a bit spread on this part when it was printed, because it was being printed with this face down. So you might have to take a razor blade under there and just pare away any spread that there has been in that slot, as I had to. And now we can secure that in place using 2 of these M3 cap head bolts, 20 millimeters long, one into each of these holes here. Okay, so with our top in place and the majority of our cables here ready to go, we can take our new Digital Bird 4-axis mainboard, okay, which looks like this, and install that into the back, ready for everything to plug in. Now, what you're going to do then is line the focus and the zoom RJ45 ports up with the holes on the side of the device here. Okay, and that just goes in there, and these ports should just pop through neatly on those holes like that. And then what I'm going to do is just take two 1.7 self-tapper screws, and we can only support these boards with 2 screws, but there's a small hole at the top left hand corner and another small hole here in this corner, and I'm just going to screw that board down with these. Okay, so now that we have our main board screwed into place, before we go any further we need to sort out all these cables that are coming through. And for that I've come up with these little C-shaped pieces, like so. And in the inside face of here, you'll find that there are some 4 little dots, okay? And you can see how I've got one of these placed in here already, if you can see that orange piece there. So what you do is you gather up the cables here and further down here, and then with a touch of super glue on the little dimples on the end of this piece, you can super glue that around those cables like so, like this one here that's already in. Okay, and what this is doing is basically keeping all these cables out of the way of the belt drive that's running up behind there, so that the cables are then coming out over here and aren't affecting that belt at all. So I'll put the other one in just now and we'll take it from there. Okay, so there we have it, where I've got 2 cables, my switch and my shutter release coming out of the top bracket here, and all the other cables coming from the front are coming through the bracket below that. Right, so we can start plugging things in. Now it's going to be difficult to show where everything goes on camera like this. I will try my best to be in 2 places at once if I come around like so. First thing you need to do though is remove your ESP32 from the board, because you'll find that underneath there are a couple of ports here. The yellow port here is for our tally lights, and that can go in like so. Okay. The port next door is only if you're building the VISCA head. That's for the UART cable, and that's our serial communication between the VISCA head and the VISCA base rather, and the top processor. Now it will say UART on the cable. It's a white cable, and there are a number of white cables. It's white plugs rather, because I've just run out of colours. So inevitably, the good thing about this is, I guess, it doesn't matter if you get these wrong, they're not going to blow anything up. But we'll try not to get it wrong. So our UART cable from our VISCA base goes into here, if you're building that version of it. And I've just noticed there that one of these little crimps has popped out. Watch out for that, because they have a tendency to do that sometimes. So we can plug that in now into our UART port. This cable up here, as mentioned, the blue is our shutter release jack. I can go in over here. This cable here is another one of the 2-pin white ones, and it's reading on the side read pan. So this is the read switch that reads the the pan position for the homing on the pan side, and that's coming through. And on the board here there are two positions for reed switch. The first one is for the tilt reed, and you can see it coming from here, so we can plug that one in here. Try and keep the cables tidy. The second one is for next door to it, and that's from the pan reed. Okay. Now the coloured cable here is from my tilt motor. Now that tilt motor cable can come up this way. I found out later that my cable was too short to have it come this way, but it can come either way. It can come up through the same hole as these other cables, or it can come up the same way as the pan stepper cable, which is this one. So the pan stepper is the second one, or from the top, and that goes in here. Press this home. The tilt stepper is the top one. Hopefully the cable is long enough this way around. There we go, there's our tilt stepper in. I'd have liked that to have been a bit tidier, but never mind. And this one here, the purple end, is our 7.5 volts if you're using the VISCA head. Again, it's a VISCA cable. It's our PoE power supply, and that comes in and goes into the purple port at the top here. That one in. And last but not least here, the orange cable in this group is for our auxiliary power supply. That's the power supply coming from this barrel port here that provides 7.5 volts output or input. Okay. Now there are 3 blue 4-pin ports here, and they are all I2C ports. The first one on this side is for our tilt, okay, and that's for our tilt encoder, which we haven't actually installed yet. The one down from it on this side is for our pan encoder, which we have the cable for here, and it's blue to match the colour of the port. So our pan encoder goes into the bottommost one. If I can get it to go in. Go. Which leaves 2 blue ones. This one here is going to be for the OLED display, which we'll get later, the one that goes that way. So, and also the tilt encoder is going to go in that one. Okay. So that just leaves our switch here, which is black, and that goes into the black port in the top. Small 2-pin black. Okay. So that's our arrangement so far, and I'll add other cables as we go along. Now, what you can do is let some of these cables run underneath the ESP32, and some of them will run over the top. It's very important that you get the ESP32 back in, excuse me, the right way around, and that the pins are aligned correctly on the base. Otherwise all sorts of trouble can start if the power goes to the wrong pin. So the USB port is to the bottom of the device, and the aerial for the Wi-Fi is to the top of the device. Okay, so I'm just going to put that in while I can, and try and keep these cables arranged around it. That looks good. Press it down into place again. So yeah, make sure that, you know, have a last look along the edge on both sides to make sure that A, your pins are lined up with the board underneath correctly, that your USB is to the bottom, and that none of the cables have gotten trapped between the pins and the board, that you haven't skewered a cable. I've been there and done that. So what we can do now then is just tuck any those cables away. Like so. And now we can take a look at this gasket piece, which is slightly different from previous models, and it also has a pocket for the tilt encoder in it. So remember, we put our tilt encoder magnet on the end of the shaft this time. So when we bring our gasket into play, like so, okay, there is a small pocket in here for that encoder. And if I can just lay my hands on that encoder, which seems to have gone walkabout. There we go. So here's our second AS5600 encoder on the short cable with the blue end. So that drops in with the chip again facing towards the magnet. And you can see I've just dropped it in there, push down, and that's how I just leave it. So now we can bring that cable over, and this one goes into the higher of the three blue 4 pins for our tilt. And that's pretty much our cabling done, bar our battery power, which we're going to look at in a moment. And the third blue port here is for our OLED display, which is coming up next as part of the battery bay. So we'll look at that next. Okay, so having a look at our battery bay, I've already actually assembled this one, but I'll go through the different parts of it with you just now. So if we turn the bay over to the back, we can see there's a number of things. First of all, we have our wiring harness, which is our two-prong digital bird wiring harness. That just goes into here at the bottom, where you can see all this white gunk. It slides in there, and the cables are run in the track that's provided up to here, and it pops out here as this red cable. Now, the best way I've found of getting those in is to use hot glue. So I just push the board in, prongs will show through like so on this side, ready to receive the MP style batteries. And then I just fill the gap up with hot glue. Now the advantage of using hot glue is if you did damage any of these pins or anything, the hot glue will pick out quite readily. You can repair the pin and put the thing back in. I've just found hot glue incredibly useful for non-structural holding jobs like this, usually for cables. I never use it for anything structural, but to fill a gap like this and keep a board held in place, it's absolutely invaluable. So that's the cable. That's the first element that goes into this. Up on top here, we have one of those little, I've got a batch of them here, OLED displays, these tiny little OLED displays, which allow us to read our battery voltage and the PTZ ID, if you're using the Wi-Fi PTZ on the system, show up on this OLED. So that little OLED board has 4 pins on the back of it, and it'll be provided with the cable attached, and that just gets placed in and can be seen through the little window in the circle in the back there, just like the last head. The OLED goes so that the cable comes out the top like so. And then you'll find in the small parts a strap, looks like so. And in the black plastic part there's a couple of receptacle slots that echo the ones in the back of here, and then that just gets super glued over the top, just inside the slots, and it just holds that OLED display in place, like so. The other feature of this is a locking mechanism for the battery. I like to design the heads so that they can be mounted inverted, but when they're mounted inverted, the NP batteries can have a tendency to slide out. So to give some security against that, this one has a locking button. Now you notice it's spring loaded and it moves that little catch. The button inside there looks like that. Okay, hopefully you can see that. And it goes in from the back, from this side, in first. Then on the back of that button, like here, there's a circle which is for this little magnet. So you push it in first. Sorry, not magnet, spring. You drop your spring into that little hole in the back of there. And the spring just gives it that spring back that you can see going on there. And then there's another cover piece that looks like this. It's orange. And another hole for the other side of the spring. And again, there's two slots in the black plastic either side of that push button receptacle, and this cover then just gets super glued over the top of the spring and into that. No glue on the spring, just on the slots to receive these upstands. And that makes your locking device. You may find if it's acting too severely on the battery, you know, making it hard to get the battery in and out, you can file this little piece here that catches the battery down a little to and maybe take the edge off the corners there with a file so that it's not such a severe catch on the battery. So, and these are the last two cables we need to plug in really. So we have the blue cable for our OLED display and the red cable which is power from the batteries. So if we bring our head back up into the picture here, and we can see that this port is lying at a different angle from the other two is for our OLED display. Again, it's an I2C port. And the battery cable then comes up and plugs into the red port in the top here. Then we can simply bring these two together, making sure our cables aren't trapped anywhere. And we have 3 holes here, 1, 2, 3, to secure this in place. So one thing I didn't mention was there are 4 little plastic tabs to print off. I don't have them handy, but they're very small tabs which just get pressed into those holes in the side of this. I don't super glue them. If they break off, it means you can just print off another little tab and press it in. Okay, so to secure the back, I've driven in 2 M3 20mm long cap head bolts into the top 2 here, and this last one here inside the battery bay is an M4 cap head bolt, and pretty sure it's 30 or possibly 40. Yeah, it's 30mm long that goes in here. I think it's the only M4 like that anyway in the kit. So. And we're very nearly there. All that's left really before we do our tests and checks is to install our Andor quick release plate onto here. And for that, you'll find in the kit one quarter screw. I'll go through there and connect up. I can find an Allen key to fix it. So now we're ready to work on our camera support. There's a part I skipped over. I was accused of skipping over the last time, so let's get it right this time. Okay, so on to the last stage of the build, which is to put together the camera mount. Now, the camera mount is based on this L bracket, and what we're going to do is build onto that this plate. Now, this is the support for either our zoom or our focus for the right hand side if you're on the back of the camera. And alongside it we have another piece, looks like this, which is for the opposite side. So this piece, look at this piece first of all, this bigger part, it's printed as two parts, this part and this part, and then they are super glued together, okay, to form this solid block. Then we have an M5 8mm long brass insert. The brass inserts we've used on other parts of the kit have been generally only 6mm, but in this it's an 8mm long brass insert, M5. And we have these M5 wing nuts, adjustable wing nuts. You know, you can pull them out like that and adjust the position if they're getting in the way of something. And that comes together and looks like that. And when you purchase focus motor kit, it will come with this 50mm carbon tubes, and these effectively are designed to go into there and lock down for whichever side you're doing it for. And then your focus motor will get mounted like this. This one's too tight already. On the end of the tube and go onto your lens. So take that off just now. So if you look at the shape of this, this actually matches the shape of the underside of your L bracket. So all we do is we take that and we put it on there, and it should just press into place like so. Okay, and that gives us that side. Then we take a 50mm, I've got a 50 by 37, yeah, 37 wide Swiss clamp, which I use. Something along those sides. I don't supply this part in the kit, you have to find one of these yourself. This one's a Sunfroto and it was really expensive. You can get them much cheaper than I got this, so I'm not recommending this one in particular. And that goes through the slot here in your L bracket, and at the moment all I do is put another one of those little brass inserts. So that's all I've been doing, is putting another one of those little brass inserts on it with an M5 running through from this plate out the bottom to hold this in place. What I think I'll do is provide you with a thumb screw that you can force that M5 into, so it gives you a better grip. Basically, it just makes that more. So look in the parts for some sort of serrated thumb screw for that purpose. On the other side, for if this were your focus motor, this were your zoom motor, again you need a tube clamp. So we have a second tube clamp, and this one again has a brass insert pressed into the top here. I think it's 8mm again, yeah, pretty sure it is. And that just sits here in the corner. You probably find it. That's how we put that on in the wrong place now. Here we go. So we put that out as far as we can. It generally needs to be, and then tighten that up. Okay, and this time we have another one of these adjustable wing nuts, and there's a hole here in the bottom of the L bracket, and that should perfectly match the position of the plastic clamp on the top. And as you tighten that up, you'll be tightening on the tube that can run on the left hand or side of the camera, depending on this side of the camera, whichever way you're looking at it. So that's basically the assembly for the L bracket. Now, to allow the camera, you may want to adjust the camera back and forward. So you would have an ordinary Swiss plate for that, which would go on to there, like so, with your camera mounted underneath it, and then you can move your camera back and forward in this way to get a balance on the tilt. Okay. My recommendation is that this is really too long, it will hit the bottom of the head. I would probably recommend this was about 110 millimeters long. I think this is 120 or 130 millimeters long, this particular one, but 110 would be more than enough. Too long and you can't get the camera far enough back on it, and it can start to interfere with your lens at the front. I think 110 is probably the optimum for that particular Swiss plate. So if we pull our head up here again, I take my camera, mount my Swiss plate on the bottom like so. That Swiss plate then can slide onto L bracket, tighten up on this side, and then you're looking for a balance in the center of that, not too far forward, not too far back. That's a little far back rather. The balance isn't too critical on this, it's not a gimbal as such, but you want it to be fairly close depending on your lens to the center, and that's probably pretty close to the center. Going this way, I can find out where the balance is pretty much for this setup in the middle of this Swiss plate. So what I'll be aiming to do is that when I put this onto here, release that, I'm going to slide it down, and there's markers here on the side, so I know that I'm looking for the middle of this, so I want that marker on the side of there to be approximately in the middle of there, and lock that in place like so. And there we have our head, and now it stands up on its own. Amazing. Battery pack ready to go. Okay, so here's our complete head. So all we need to do now is test it all, check that all our ports are working as expected, that it's performing with no problems. If you've built the VISCA head, check that it works with OBS and vMix. If you've built the pure motion control head, make sure that it works with other parts of the system. And I'll do all that in the next video, and we'll have a look at the head's full capabilities from there. Thanks for watching.